question for today is, are there greater and lesser evils? And if there are greater and lesser evils, how will we determine which ones are worse, more evil than others? To answer the first question, yes, I do believe there are certain things that are more morally wrong or more evil than others. I come to this conclusion because of two things. First, because this seems to be what the Bible teaches. Second, because this is the way humans think and the way governments operate. Let me begin with the Bible and end with human thought and government. Now, I wish I had time to explain why we can put so much reliance and so much trust in the Bible, but I'll have to leave that for a future video. We see various places in the Bible where there are specific laws given and then various different punishments given to people who break those laws. For example, we see that adultery was punishable by death, but the punishment for theft was simply paying back what was stolen plus some extra. We also see Jesus in the book of Matthew in chapter 23 rebuking the Pharisees for neglecting the weightier matters of the law. You see, the Pharisees had become so consumed with making sure they were getting their tithing just right that they had let justice and mercy and faithfulness go out the window. So Jesus calls them out for neglecting the more weightier or more important matters of the law. Since there are greater and lesser laws or commands given, I come to the conclusion that there are greater and lesser evils committed when those greater or lesser laws are broken. Now I need to clarify a point here before I move on to my second point. There is no such thing as a lesser or small evil or sin. Yes, some evil, some sins are worse, more morally wrong than others, but there is no such thing as a small sin. All sin, all evil, from the small covetous thought to the furious act of murder, is a huge offense to a holy God who is set apart in his perfect justice. So when you hear me say there are greater and lesser evils, don't hear me saying I think there are some sins that aren't really that big of a deal. That is not my position, and that is not what I am saying. Perhaps a better way to say what I'm trying to get across would be, I think there are really bad sins and there are really, really bad sins. Hopefully that makes sense and was helpful in understanding my view. Now moving on to point two. This idea that there are greater and lesser evils or sins or crimes or whatever you want to call them, this idea that there are greater and lesser of them comes across in the way humans think. And this is the way humans make their governments work. I know morally that speeding is less of a crime than murder. And the U.S. government shows it believes that speeding is less of a crime than murder by the way it punishes the two different offenses. I could get a $200 ticket for speeding, but I could get a lifetime in prison for murder. Now that I have spent some time laying down the argument that there are indeed greater and lesser evils, I would now like to move to the second half of the question, which is, how do we distinguish between greater and lesser evils? Or how do we tell which sins, which acts of evil are worse than others? Now I freely admit here that I do not have a clear answer to this half of the question. This is a legitimately hard, challenging question for me, and I'm a little hesitant. I am hesitant to have an absolute answer to this question. But what I do have are a few guidelines that I find helpful. First and foremost, Go to the Bible and see for yourself what it says about the order and importance of different commands. And the varying severity of different sins. Search the scripture to see what God is most concerned about and what he is most strongly against. God has put his moral law into the human conscience, and though our consciences are easily corrupted, we still can naturally understand why certain sins are worse than others. Second, think about all people as carrying the image of God. In Genesis, we learn that God made people, men and women, in his own image. People were made to reflect the image of God. They were made to reflect certain parts or characteristics of God. Thus I find that the greater the damage or hurt that occurs to the image is often the greater sin or evil done. Would you rather be mocked verbally or beaten physically? Would you rather have something stolen from you or you be shot? Being made fun of hurts people. It hurts the image of God. Being physically beaten with a rod hurts people and God's image more. And likewise, getting shot damages God's image more than having something stolen from you. Hopefully these two guidelines are helpful when distinguishing between greater and lesser evils. But why should we even care about this? Why have I just spent a decent amount of time talking about greater and lesser evils? Why does this even matter? In a perfect world, I probably wouldn't care about this. I probably would hold the position that it doesn't matter. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a broken and confusing world. And you and I undoubtedly have or are going to face some very tough moral dilemmas and some very hard decisions in this life. And I want us to be ready as much as we can for those challenging moral decisions when they arise. In the book of Joshua, Rahab the prostitute lies about hiding two men in order to protect them, and later her life is spared for helping these men. In Exodus, the Hebrew midwives disobey and lie to the authority that is over them in order to protect the lives of baby boys, and these midwives are blessed for their action. We see these stories in the Bible where people do something that is wrong in order to prevent something worse from happening. And that is seen as a good thing. I want people to think about and wrestle with these hard decisions so that when they occur in their lives, they are ready for them. You may never be in a situation as extreme as Rahab's, but you most likely will face at some point in your life a situation where you will either have to break a certain law or standard in order to prevent something worse from happening, or B, learn to be at peace with knowing you were faithful in keeping the law, though it may have caused something worse to have happened. If you are of the opinion that it was wrong for Rahab to lie in order to protect the men she was hiding, if you believe that we should always be faithful in keeping the law, even if it causes more harm than it prevents, I want to share an analogy with you that hopefully may help change your mind. And I'll end with this analogy. I want I want you to imagine for a moment that you're driving down a highway at 60 miles per hour. It's a one-lane, two-way highway with the double yellow stripes. It's a non-passing zone. Then suddenly, you're driving down the road, and then suddenly a young child, he runs right in front of you in your lane. So you quickly glance over the other lane, you see nobody's coming, and you swerve into the other lane so you don't hit the kid. You just broke the law. You just passed in a non-passing zone. But is that really breaking the law? If a cop saw you get in the wrong lane in order to avoid running over a child, do you think that he's going to write you a ticket for passing in a non-passing zone? You see, I am suggesting to you that when one breaks a law in order to keep the higher law of protecting life, you are no longer really guilty of breaking that first law. Thanks for watching. I'm Isaac Duggins on Life Matters. God bless. Thanks for clicking on this video and listening to my speech. I hope you enjoyed it. If you had any questions or comments, please put those in the comment section below my videos. I'm going to go ahead and pull our next question for my next speech, and we'll go from there. So my next speech is going to be on why is there such a high divorce rate in today's society? Is there a solution to this? If so, what? So that's going to be quite a challenging question, but I'll see what I can do with it. So thanks for watching. From a grave that somehow made you cry.